Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the midweek edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. Tonight, we will be looking at a topic, strategic leadership, managing the strategic process as HR professionals. And tonight, our facilitator is Ahmed Ladan Gobel, and I'll be introducing him just for the benefit of one or two people who may not yet be quite familiar with him. Meanwhile, please reach out to your colleagues, your subordinates, anyone you know who benefit from the insights that will be shared from tonight's edition. Ahmed Gobel is a highly skilled, dedicated, and licensed HR professional and corporate lawyer with well over 30 years hands-on experience in both the private sector and the public sector. He holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in history, a Master of Business Administration specializing in management, and a Bachelor of Law LLB. He is a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. His journey with Chartered Institute of Personnel Management started in 1989 when he was admitted into the institute as an affiliate, from where he gradually rose through the ranks to become a fellow in the year 2006. His service to Chartered Institute of Personnel Management over the course of his 34 years of membership include, but not limited to, he was branch secretary and chairman, Kaduna branch. He was elected council member. He was chairman, currently is chairman audit committee of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management. He was also chairman, professional conduct and ethics committee of Chartered Institute of Personnel Management. He has been a member, board of fellows of CIPF, member of the governing council various times. He's a member, board of trustees, CIPM Multipurpose Cooperative Society. Gobel has worked in the public and private sector, like I mentioned, and I'd like to mention some of the places specifically where he has worked. He served as the Personnel and Industrial Relations Officer in 1985 with the Ajaokuta Steel Company Limited, and he rose to become the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Critical Hope Nigeria Limited in 2013, after serving for 12 years as General Manager, Company Secretary, and legal advisor. In 2018, he joined the Dangote Cement Group as a senior general manager and was designated as regional HR advisor and head organizational development Pan-Africa. He was subsequently promoted group general manager and designated as strategic HR business partner for the commercial and Anglophone subsidiaries of Dangote Cement, overseeing the 6 Anglophone countries, including Ethiopia, Ghana, Sierra Leone, South Africa, Tanzania, and Zambia. In this capacity, he served as HR advisor at Dangote Cement Ethiopia PLC and HR advisor at Dangote Cement Zambia Limited, respectively. He was also a former Honorable Commissioner for Commerce, Industry, and Cooperatives, and member of the Kwara State Executive Council, and at various times sat on the board of various companies, state and federal government parastatals and committees as director and member, acquiring extensive corporate and board experience over time. I would like to mention some of this experience and exposure. He was chairman, Kwara State Investment and Property Development Company Limited, Ilorin. He was chairman, Kwara State Industrial Trust Fund Limited, Ilorin. He was also a member, National Labour Advisory Council, Federal Ministry of Labour. He was also a member, governing board of the National Bureau of Statistics. He has been a member of the National Steering Committee, Open Government Partnership, Federal Ministry of Justice. He was a member, Federal Government Tripartite Committee on the Review of the Minimum Wage. He was a member, Governing Board, Kaduna State Water Corporation. He served as Vice President of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Also served as Legal Advisory Committee of Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Again, he is a member of the Governing Council of Manufacturing Association of Nigeria. Then he was director at various times at Critical Hope Kaduna Limited and Woodcraft Industries Limited. He is also a partner, Gobel & Co. Legal Practitioners. Ladies and gentlemen, he is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Management, member of the Nigerian Bar Association, member of the International Bar Association, and member of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. Ladies and gentlemen, it's our privilege and pleasure having, for the second time on this prestigious platform, Ahmed Ladan Gobel. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Yemi, for that introduction. Please confirm that you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
All right. Thank you very much for having me again. It's always nice to speak to our HR colleagues and professionals, and of course, various HR topical issues with a view to at least helping us all to learn, unlearn, relearn, and of course, further our knowledge in the HR space. Today, we will be discussing strategic leadership. And of course, our focus will be how we manage the strategy process as HR professionals. In doing this, I have tried to drop an outline which will see us speak to what strategy is, what are the various levels of strategy. We'll look at the hierarchical flow of strategy. We'll look at customer-oriented strategy as opposed to product-oriented vision statement or strategy. We'll look at strategy approaches for competitive advantage. We'll look at HR managers. We will be reviewing the satisficing model as opposed to the rational decision-making model. We will then be looking at HR guidelines with a view to looking at ways to avoid cognitive bias. And then we'll draw our conclusions at the end of the discourse. What is strategy? Of course, an organizational strategy is a long-term strategic plan that roadmaps the route towards a company's goal and vision. It encompasses goals for the next 3 to 5 years, and sometimes it can be longer, and enough time to action plans and see results. But of course, it's usually short enough that all staff in the organization are motivated to reach the goals for which the strategy, of course, has been planned or for which the strategy has been drawn up. Next, we'll be looking at, of course, the levels of strategy. And although there are quite a number, we have tried to limit our discourse to just about 3, which oftentimes are what we find, of course, in the corporate space. And the first, of course, is the corporate level strategy. A corporate level strategy is that strategy which answers the questions around where do we compete? What type of industry should we be competing in? Or what market should we be competing in? What geography or geographical location should we be taking our business or competing in? Or what demography should we be targeting? Such strategy, of course, involves decision-making by the top management team, usually the CEO, members of the C-suite, the board of directors, and other corporate senior management staff for vertical integration, diversification, alliances, acquisitions, new ventures, restructuring, and divestments, of course, including even mergers. The second level, of course, is the business level strategy. This strategy is one that then answers the question around how do we compete? Now, do we want to be leaders in terms of the cost of our business? Or is it around differentiating our products? Or is it around focusing, our products to particular demographic? This oftentimes also includes benefits and cost of, say, first mover advantages. Often, an enterprise participating in multiple businesses, of course, will have different business strategies. So you may not necessarily have one business strategy. You may have business strategies. And this is what you have in the case of conglomerates, and FMCG businesses, of course, like you have the Lever Brothers, the Nestle's, the Cadbury's, the Dangote Cement, the Dangote groups, and so on and so forth. The third level, of course, is the functional level. Now, the functional level tries to answer the question around how do we implement our business strategy? Now, this strategy is typically directed at improving the effectiveness of functional operations within a company, such as the manufacturing function, the HR function, the marketing function, the maintenance, and of course, the operations function. Now, next we'll try to look at the hierarchical flow of strategy. And of course, the hierarchical flow of strategy speaks to the corporate strategy. Usually the corporate strategy of any organization is one that is designed oftentimes at headquarters. And it is the headquarters, of course, of the business which determines the area, within which the business wants to compete. Now, the business strategy, of course, is then cascaded down to various divisions of the business, or what we call strategic business units, or SBUs, in the business. So you could have a holding company which designs the corporate strategy at the level of the holding company at the headquarters. These strategies are then cascaded, of course, to subsidiary companies, otherwise called SBUs, which then develop business strategies at their respective levels for their respective divisions. Now, the functional strategy, on the other hand, is then developed by the respective functions in each of these BUs. So you have at the top the corporate strategy, which defines the goals, the vision, the mission statement, and the specific goals that the business intends to achieve. And then you have the business strategy developed by the respective business units that you have. For example, if you have within the business unit a sugar manufacturing company or a salt manufacturing company, there's a likelihood that, of course, that their strategies will be different. Even though the corporate strategy at the level of the holding company may be the same. Now, the functional strategy to then achieve the business strategy for the respective business units is then developed by the respective functions. So you will have the HR function, for example, developing its own strategy. You have the sales and marketing function developing its own strategy. You have other functions, of course, in the organization also developing their respective business strategies. Now, it is Theodore Levitt in his book, The Market Myopia, who said that they let others take customers away from them because they assumed themselves to be in the railroad business rather than in the transportation business. The reason they defined their industry wrong was because they were railroad-oriented instead of transport-oriented. They were product-oriented instead of customer-oriented. And what is this saying? It is that you have a business, which of course is in the transportation business, but was more focused, of course, on seeing itself as a railroad business, as opposed to a transportation business, which should focus on what it can deliver to its customers as a transportation business. Instead, they were looking at themselves, or they were looking at the product which they have, which is the railroad, as opposed to the product which the customer wants, which is a transportation business. And so because they chose to limit themselves, to just the product which they have, they then suffered losses arising from other businesses, of course, understanding that, look, we can do a lot more in the transportation business to satisfy our customers rather than just sticking to railroad business. So such businesses, of course, would have thought about, okay, we can go into hiring coaches. We can go into, of course, deploying buses. You will still be satisfying your customers by providing, the transportation business through different ways. Next, we'll be looking at, using what you call the customer-oriented vision statement in developing strategy. Now, the customer-oriented vision statement is the one that defines a business in terms of providing solutions to customer needs, just like I spoke about the transportation business. An example of such business is the business for which I work, Dangote Cement PLC. I mean, part of our vision is to be a global leader, or our vision is to be a global leader in cement production, to be respected for the quality of our products and services and for the way we conduct our business. That is to say, ethical conduct is very important for us. We are also, of course, mindful of the quality of the products that we deliver to the market, and we want to be global leaders in the production of cement. It is the reason why we have moved from just having 4 cement plants in Nigeria to having at least 13 other cement plants in 13 different countries in Africa. Now, other businesses, of course, may define themselves in terms of, say, the good or service which they produce, which they provide, and an example of such, in developing strategy is to say we are in the typewriter business. Now, when you say we are in the typewriter business, it simply means that all that your organization, for example, can produce or will produce will be typewriters. As opposed, of course, to say producing desktops or laptops, which of course will better serve the need of customers because of changes in technology. Now, such a business strategy has the tendency to be less flexible. It's also not needs-based because you're not looking at the needs of your customers. You are simply looking at the fact that this is what we do, as opposed to what is it that our customers want from us or expect from us or we should be doing. Now, such business strategies, of course, can also lead to a myopic view of your business, as it were. Now, what are those strategic approaches that businesses need to develop, of course, for competitive advantage? And we say the first, of course, is strategic planning. Strategic planning is a formal top-down planning approach, which starts, of course, from analysis to formulation of strategy, and of course, ending with the implementation of the strategy that has been designed. The second, of course, is scenario planning. Scenario planning is also a formal top-down planning approach. But of course, in its case, it starts with different what ifs. What if we do it this way? What if? So various scenarios are developed and are painted, and then the business begins to ask questions around, okay, what if we do it this way? Or what if we do it the other way? And of course, plans are then developed around the what ifs, around the scenarios that have been developed. And of course, it also ends with implementation of the most probable of the options or the scenarios that have been developed. Now, the third, of course, is strategy as planned emergence. Now, this is a less formal approach. It is also top-down and bottom-up approach, but it combines both employee initiatives with management coordination. That is to say, in such a business, employees are allowed to come up with suggestions on strategies that can help the business grow. And when such suggestions or such strategic ideas come from employees, they are reviewed both at the top management level, or even at the level of the employees. And of course, the initiatives coming from the employees is then combined, of course, with the strategic management coordination of the business leaders for developing, of course, the strategy and, of course, taking the strategy forward. Next, we'll be looking at, of course, strategic planning framework. Now, the strategic planning framework, of course, envisages first analyzing the strategy and then formulating the strategy and, of course, implementing the strategy. Now, strategy analysis, like we said earlier on, will involve, of course, developing a vision, a mission statement, and of course, crafting all of this around the values of business. Now, you will also have external analysis of the external environment, stakeholders that the business, of course, will be dealing with, and the environment within which, or the industry within which the business will be operating. The third, of course, will be internal analysis. and engagement with stakeholders, analyzing the needs of stakeholders within the business, in developing, of course, the strategy. Now, this then dovetails, of course, into the formulation of the strategy, like we said earlier. And of course, the formulation of the strategy, of course, starts, of course, with the corporate strategy, which like I said in the example I gave, a strategy developed by a holding company, which is then cascaded, of course, to subsidiary companies, which then develop the business strategy, while the respective functions, of course, that you have in the strategic business unit, whether the HR, whether the finance function, whether the sales and marketing function, whether the logistics and distribution function, then develop their functional strategies, of course, to key into the business strategy, which of the SBU, which in turn, of course, keys into the corporate strategy of the holding company. The last bit of the hierarchical strategic planning framework, of course, it is the implementation stage. And in implementation, of course, businesses look at the structure of the business, the culture of the business, and of course, the control environment, which helps, of course, to either minimize incidences of abuses of processes and procedures, or even incidences of, say, fraud or malfeasance in businesses. And of course, you have the corporate governance and the business ethics. Now, example of a top-down approach, of course, is Apple. And Steve Jobs, for example, predicted that customers in the future, of course, will need, predicted customer needs. And he was one of the very few successful technology firms which use, of course, top-down planning process. And it's one of the reasons why, of course, Apple remains one of the top-known businesses that you have around the world today. Now, we spoke earlier on about strategy or scenario planning. So we're looking at strategy as a scenario planning framework. And we said it is that strategy, which envisions different what-if plans. Like, for example, what if we have new laws or regulations? How will this affect our business? So such a business, of course, will try to craft its strategy around the possibility of new regulations or new regulatory compliance requirements or new laws, of course, affecting businesses. You could also have a scenario planning strategy developed around demographic shifts. For example, businesses could say that, look, our products are intended to target particular markets or particular demography in the business. It could be millennials and Gen Zs. And then the business then crafts a strategy, of course, around this. Now, changing economic conditions also may affect business strategy. So it's the reason why scenario planning, oftentimes we'll ask them, what if, you have a changing economic condition? For example, when at the advent of the current administration in Nigeria on May 29, President Tinubu announced the withdrawal of fuel subsidy. That, of course, drove businesses around the country to rejigging and replanning, of course, their strategy. So that's an example, of course, of scenario planning. So you could have a business saying, okay, we do know that by May 29, say 2023, for example, there will be a change of government. Now, is there a likelihood that, of course, there will be some changes, of course, in the economic fauna, in the country, and then the business then develops a strategy around that. The other, of course, is scenario planning around what if you have some technological changes or technological advancement in the business world. How will it affect our business? So this, of course, tries to answer the what ifs that comes around scenario planning. Now, you then generate, of course, a dominant strategic plan based upon which, of course, the business then implements the most probable of the options, like I said earlier on. And a good example of a company that thrives or still continues to thrive with scenario planning, of course, is Shell. Because Shell continuously strategizes, of course, based on prevailing laws in the countries where they operate, based on developments around the economy, and so on and so forth. Now, then we look at strategy as planned emergence framework. Now, we spoke about the top-down and the bottom-up approaches earlier on. Now, of course, the bottom-up approach is the bottom-up strategic initiative emerges oftentimes, of course, like I said, from employees who are down the ladder, But management, of course, allows employees to ventilate, their opinions about how to develop strategies for the growth of the business. So such, of course, strategies, when developed by employees, are then properly coordinated, of course, by management after a thorough evaluation of the strategy or the proposal, of course, from the employees. Now, such strategic plan relies on data plus the personal experiences of, say, the employee or the group of employees that are making the proposal. Of course, it also relies on deep domain expertise and relies on frontline employee insights into the strategic objective of the business, because you cannot suggest a growth strategy for a business if you are not ensconced, and you are not very well grounded, of course, in understanding the business philosophy itself, and the overall overarching, objective of the business in which you work. Now, a good example, of course, of a company that thrived with this approach is Starbucks coffee in the US. Starbucks, of course, was known for just brewing coffee, and selling coffee. Until an employee in Starbucks, who in fact was a store manager, proposed the idea of having a Starbucks Frappuccino. The Frappuccino, as you can see, of course, in the picture that you see on the right side, is coffee, of course, mixed with ice cream. The leadership, of course, reviewed this and accepted, of course, this strategic proposal by an employee. And what did this do for Starbucks as a business? Within the very first year of turning out the Frappuccino, the idea of the Frappuccino skyrocketed sales of Starbucks by about 20%. Now, earlier on, I had said that for us as HR, we're supposed to provide guidelines, of course, for the implementation of strategies developed by the business. Now, in doing this, oftentimes people look at what we call the satisficing, versus the rational decision-making model. Now, the satisficing model, as you will see on the left in red, as opposed to the rational decision-making model, is one that looks at time constraints as being, something that prevents optimal decision making. Oftentimes, people who work with this model or who, are seriously ensconced in this model think that you will never have enough time, to develop a plan or to implement a strategy. Now, for people who do the rational or who use the rational decision-making model, they look at strategy or whatever strategy, and they believe that an optimal decision is possible. All it requires, of course, is focus and leadership. Secondly, the satisficing model, of course, believes that you have limited ability to understand all factors that developing a strategy or a new strategy may throw up. On the other hand, people who use the rational decision-making model believe that all relevant information that you will need crafting a strategy, for planning a strategy, and for implementing a strategy is always available. You just need to know where to look for this information. The satisficing model believes that you will never have adequate information or adequate base of information for whatever kind of strategy you are developing. Again, those who use the rational decision-making model approach, of course, believe that all relevant information are understandable as they are available. Now, for proponents, of course, of the satisficing model, they believe that you have limited memory of decision makers. People think that you have little or no alternatives, to whatever proposals are being made or whatever strategies are being initiated or are being proposed, because people have very limited memory, of either how it has been done before, or how, of course, they intend to carry it forward. Those who reach the rational model approach, of course, believe that all alternative solutions are known. So you should develop a scenario strategy, and you're talking about what if we do this, or what if this happens. You already know what alternative solutions you should prepare, of course, for addressing the what ifs. Now, proponents of the satisficing model, of course, also have poor perception of factors to be considered in the decision-making process. Those who use the rational decision-making model look at all possible outcomes, and they envisage, of course, what the possible outcomes would be for every strategic decision, of course, that they make. Furthermore, the satisficing model, of course, is fast, which, of course, is the reason why at the end of the day, businesses always have to review such a strategy. Now, on the other hand, the rational model is slow. It then allows business executives to continue to review, and so where they find pitfalls in the strategy document or in the strategy process, they then think about how do we address these pitfalls. And it is the reason why they always have alternative outcomes to every, of course, strategic initiative. Now, the satisficing model assumes that every strategy that you develop is automatic. The business will work once you just put it down there. Now, those who are proponents of the rational model believe that even a good strategy requires some effort for you to be able to carry it to the end of. Proponents of the satisficing model think that, well, strategy is an everyday thing, and there are things that you can do, of course, with snap decisions. Now, the rational model, of course, proponents believe that strategies are very complex, and because they are complex, you need analytical decision skills to be able, of course, to carry them forward to achieving the strategic objectives for which, of course, they have been developed. Now, the satisficing model, of course, is error-prone. It then also has very high likelihood of biases. The rational model has been proven to be very reliable, and it is reliable because it also has very lower likelihood, of course, of biases. Next, of course, we'll be looking at, of course, HR strategy guidelines and how we then try to avoid cognitive biases. Now, there are different kinds, of course, of biases. Now, there's the bias which we call the illusion of control. And the illusion of control is the tendency for us as HR professionals or strategic business leaders to overestimate our ability to control events. Now, we believe that once you have a strategy in place, then you are in a position, of course, to control all the events around that strategy. But like I said earlier on, nobody, for example, in Nigeria thought what happened on May 29, 2023 will happen at all. Nobody thought we would be where we are today on account of the removal, of course, of fuel subsidy. Nobody thought we would be where we are on account, of course, of the fact that the Naira was suddenly, of course, being been floated, So we must try to run away, of course, from the illusion of control. Sorry, Yemi, the light just went off in my place, but of course the gem will come on in a few minutes.
It's okay, sir. It's
All
okay.
right. The next, of course, of the biases is the escalating commitment. And escalating commitment, you're looking at continuing to support a cause of action, even when it is showing signs that it will not succeed. When you see that, yes, although we do have a strategy, but this strategy, of course, that we are already seeing telltale signs, that this strategy, of course, will not succeed, but you still keep going on, and you're supporting the cause of action because you believe that no, come what may, this strategy will succeed. Now, next, of course, is what we call confirmation of bias, or what is otherwise called prior hypothesis bias. Now, this involves, of course, searching for information to support existing beliefs, which is sometimes called, like I said, a prior hypothesis bias. You begin to look for data, you begin to look for information, to support existing beliefs that you have, even when it is quite clear or it is quite evident, of course, that something is wrong with the strategy. The next of the biases, of course, is reasoning by analogy. Now, and this speaks to the tendency to use simple analogies to make sense out of complex problems. While it is obvious that a problem is complex, we attempt to trivialize them, of course, by using very simple analogies to explain them away. Whilst what is required, of course, would be a deep dive, a deep analysis of these problems to be able to understand the problem or why the problems are occurring, with the view that to them providing, of course, solutions to them. So when we just reason by analogy, what happens is whatever solutions we then find or recommend becomes peripheral, and they do not, of course, address the root cause of the problems that we face. Then there's the bias called representativeness. Representativeness, of course, involves drawing conclusions based on small samples or anecdotes. You conduct a survey, maybe around just a group of employees, and you then generalize based on the responses that you have gotten from them to say that, oh, look, because employees XYZ have said this is how we feel about this strategy, or this strategy is not working, or is working because we have done ABC. Then generalize to say, look, all employees or the business environment is already accepting this strategy. While in the actual point of fact, what you need to do, is to do or sample opinion or get data, that is even beyond the industry where you operate, for you to be able to confirm the effectiveness of your strategy or what you do. Then the last, of course, is what we call the groupthink. Now, for the groupthink, this happens when opinions coalesce around a leader without individuals critically evaluating and challenging that leader's opinions and assumptions. Okay. This strategy was put forward by Yemi Adeosun. And because it is Yemi Adeosun and is coordinator of the HR mentorship group, whatever he says is absolutely correct and it is okay. We do not challenge, this strategy. We do not review this strategy. We do not review the opinion of this leader or the assumptions that have been put forward, by this leader, and we just proceed under the mistaken belief or the wrong assumption because the leader has said so. Then it is correct, and of course, nothing can go wrong. Now, to conclude, I would like to say that strategic leadership, of course, rests majorly on good decision making. So for you to be a strategic leader, you must be one who is ready to use either of the scenarios that we have enunciated, in the course of our discourse. Because decision-making is a crucial skill, as HR professionals, we need to develop and own our decision-making skills so that we can continue to function, of course, as strategic business partners in whatever kind of businesses we find ourselves. Now, we can only do this, of course, by one, following a systematic process, just like we have shown in the course of our discourse. You want to develop a strategy, you must think around developing a corporate strategy. You must think around developing a business strategy. You must think around, of course, developing a functional strategy. You want to develop a strategic plan. You must look at, we said, scenario planning. You must look at strategies that emerge as a result of inputs, of course, from even people who are not in the decision-making level of the organization. Now, secondly, of course, is taking responsibility for a decision. Once you take a decision, you must be ready to be accountable for that decision, and you must take responsibility, for whatever decision you take as an HR practitioner. As HR practitioners and strategic business partners and leaders, we must practice decisiveness in times of urgency. When we do not decide on matters, or strategic initiatives that come before us, then we leave room, for people to begin to ponder whether or not we are part of the strategy, or whether or not we even understand strategy, or whether or not we even have input into the strategy, or we have the ability, of course, to make the strategy work. Of course, the last, of course, is learning from our mistakes. When you make mistakes, you learn from them, you correct them, and then you move forward. So as HR professionals, we can make effective decisions, of course, that lead to positive business outcomes in support of the strategic objectives of our respective organizations. Thank you very much. I'll take questions and comments that are in. Thank you, Yemi. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gobir, for that enlightening session. You have done justice to it. Obviously, strategy is not a lazy man's job. And that's why so many people don't aspire to get to that level of their career. But that is exactly what we need for leadership, to make changes and to deliver business results. Ladies and gentlemen, do you have any question for our speaker with respect to the subject matter tonight? Or would you like to say something? Or you even want to appreciate the speaker? If you raise your hands, we'll grant you the permission to unmute, and you can quickly have your say. We have just a few minutes left on tonight's session. I have tremendously enjoyed it. I liked particularly the use of models, some of the theories and concepts, how you made it very relatable, hands-on and practical. Just checking in the chat box, I can see people appreciating you, celebrating you, people saying thank you for thanking our facilitator for tonight. I was hoping that at least one or two people would like to say something. Okay, I see a hand up, and I'm excited to ask Madam Chidi to please unmute and have a say. You have the floor, Madam.
Well, good evening, sir. Good evening to all our professional colleagues on the call, and particularly to the speaker, Alhaji Ladan Gobir. I want to say thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you.
My name is Chidi Obiejesi, and my comments are this. The presentation you just made is quite enlightening, quite educative and insightful. Thank you very much. I am particularly interested in the biases when it comes to strategy for HR persons, what the biases that influence strategy construction, which you have shown. And my question would be, how can one avoid this? because you will agree with the influence of culture on the strategies we get to impute, especially in the HR department, and when it comes to one that impacts on employees and drive the business results. But how do we then avoid these biases we have, or these biases you have highlighted, so that in constructing or coming up with frameworks for our strategy, for implementation of the organizational strategy, we don't also fall into those traps? Thank you very much, sir. Those will be my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Obiejisi. As humans, of course, we have biases. Some of them are innate. Sometimes we do not even know that they exist. Some of our biases, of course, that we pick up in our day-to-day life. But when you are developing a strategy, you must consciously, and I use the word consciously very emphatically, consciously try to avoid biases that color, the strategy that you are developing or the strategy that you have to work on or to deliver, on the strategic objectives of the organization. For example, when I spoke about illusion of control, many a times, the tendency is for us to assume that, look, I'm on top of my game. It's based on the strategy that we have developed. We can typically put this ship, on cruise control, and it will just sail. Or we can practically put this flight on cruise control, and we'll just fly away until we arrive at our destination. But events, have shown, or history itself has shown, that it is not always like that. I'm sure quite a number of businesses at the beginning of 2020, even late, in 2019, had various strategic plans. Nobody, in their wildest imagination, expected what COVID-19 foisted on us. So those who had the illusion that they had control of their strategy at the time, were surprised by what COVID-19, of course, foisted on all of us. Even late in 2019, when we began to battle it, we didn't think that we were going to get to a situation where we will have to, of course, lock down completely for 1, 2, or 3 months. And then businesses then began to run around trying to rejig their strategy for them to be able, of course, to continue in operation. So as HR professionals, yes, like I said, you will naturally have innate biases. But as a strategic business partner, you then try to put these biases, of course, behind you. And you try to focus deliberately, on how you do not allow these biases, of course, to override, your ability to ensure that the strategy that the business has developed is supported by yourself, and you have the people, around the strategy to be able to deliver, of course, the strategy. The reason why, for example, we also use HR analytics, for example, now, is because long before now, a lot of the reasoning that we do as HR professional is simply by analogy. We just make simple analogies around issues, and we try to just make sense out of complex problems that are thrown at us. But these days, what do we do? Of course, developments around the world or even around the HR space has now taught us that, look, we need to dig deep. We need to be data conscious. We need to go beyond just analogical reasoning, for solving complex problems, to, of course, diving deep and using data and HR analytics and metrics, of course, to solve problems around us. You can also no longer, of course, draw conclusions, based, of course, on very small samples that you generate maybe in your workplace. It is the reason why when we want to do surveys now, we do surveys, around so many businesses, of course, in our industry, with the view to benchmarking, and then, of course, making suggestions that help our businesses. So the way to deal with this, of course, is to understand that, yes, as humans, naturally, of course, we will have biases. But when we understand as HR professionals, that as HR professionals, our role, of course, is to provide strategic business partnership for the achievement of the strategic goals and objectives of the organization. We then try to push these innate biases behind us, of course, and focus more on trying to deliver on the strategy that we have. I don't know if I've managed to answer your question, but we must be conscious, of course, about pushing these biases behind us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gobel. As you are making this explanation, clarification, as you are providing expansion to your earlier thoughts and to respond to Mrs. Obejesi, something came to my mind, sir. And I think because of these possible biases, for example, is one of the reasons why when most organizations are having their retreats or a brainstorming session, they typically hire a third party, maybe a consultant or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes the consultant or third party may, in quotes, almost have zero knowledge about the business. So, for example, say Dangote Cement, you may go and get somebody that is into gym and fitness. Why? This person will not be colored with your experience. He will just be listening for facts, figures, and insights. And that way, we don't use our experience or biases to override and imagine opportunity or to overhype a situation, a challenge, or also an opportunity. Very, very interesting insight.
Exactly.
Sir, somebody dropped a question in the chat. David, I will read it quickly. And he's saying here, he says, sir, thanks for the training. But what of a point or situation where you make a suggestion, that is the employee or the HR makes a suggestion to the organization and management, and they throw your suggestion away. In other words, they ignore it. Then later, the organization is now going through the challenges you are trying to avoid that you had foreseen, and if they had followed your suggestion, they would not have maybe moved into this trap or situation. David is asking, what would you do, sir?
Well, like I always say, organizations exist first, of course, to serve the interests of the owners, the shareholders. And of course, the shareholders are those who then determine who leads this organization. Those who have been chosen to lead the organization, of course, also then determine who are those that we hire, to work, for example, in the business. So for an organization that does not see anything good, say in recommendations or, suggestions to improve strategy, say from those who are not in the management level. There are those kind of organizations who, of course, just see strategy as something that those at the top only prepare, or only work on, and then they drop on those below to implement. And we have found, that most of the successful businesses are ones that allow views, opinions, strategic initiatives, of course, from the bottom, grow up to the top, and then having, of course, the top coordinate these strategic initiatives and develop them into strategic business objectives for the organization. Now, where you find that you do not have this kind of opportunity, of course, I do know, and I agree that this can be very, very discouraging. But I've also worked in places where a group of employees, whom were later found to be very high performing, employees refused to give up, and they continue, of course, to make suggestions. If you work, for example, in a very small SME, the tendency, of course, is for the business owner, to say, what idea can you bring? I mean, were you there when I even set up the business? But if you work in larger organization, then there is the opportunity, of course, because such organizations also provide opportunities for engagement with their employees, and they provide opportunities to ventilate for employees to ventilate, of course, their opinions, their views, make suggestions on how to improve the business. Now, such organizations, of course, are likely to, of course, to listen to suggestions from employees. Now, if you are in an organization, of course, where they do not listen, it is impossible to force your views, of course, on a business owner or on top management. And unfortunately, of course, even when your views are not shared, and at the end of the day, the business burns its fingers, from using a particular strategy as opposed to what perhaps employees or some categories of employees have recommended. It is also difficult to go and say, told you so. Exactly. Because I told you so can also be very damaging to the career, of the employee. So you manage this relationship, and where you have the opportunity, yes, of course, you try to make these recommendations and these suggestions. If it is a place where, of course, they do not give rooms for employees to air their opinion or suggestions or suggest strategies for growing the business, my advice is always, can you look at how to take your suggestions elsewhere? Maybe if business A is refusing to take this, maybe if you have opportunity in business B, you can go make such recommendations and suggestions and have them. But there is no one-size-fits-all response to this, because you cannot force a strategy on a business owner. You can only persuade them, of course, to look at the strategy and see the benefits, of course, that you have in in running strategy, if they so see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ahmed Kobe, for that excellent response. I think we have Madam Obiejesi online again. Please, you go ahead with your comments, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. And thank you, Alhaji Gobre, for that wonderful response. In addition, I just thought I should add this comment. Sometimes why our ideas or suggestions are not accepted may be as a result of presentation, may be as a result of timing, may also be as a result of our ability to engage stakeholders. That is aside from what Alhaji Gobre have just responded to. Because I've had this experience. Well, I have worked with quite smaller organizations, and I've also had this experience to notice that sometimes you make a presentation, probably because the timing is wrong, or because it wasn't presented to show the impact it will have on organization. Imagine, let me share this experience. I once worked with an organization where the owner of the business belong to a denomination that do not celebrate Christmas. So they know nothing about end of the year or going on end of the year break. And I needed to present that as part of an intervention for staff to shut down during the end of the year and go for Christmas break or end of the year break. These people don't believe in that, but I had to present it in such a way that they saw the cost saving um, benefits of it to the organization, where we don't have to put on this. Of course, there was no business. It's not, it's a kind of business where at the end of the year, most businesses are shut down and you won't even have your customers patronize you and things like that. At the end of the day, it was approved, not because I just went there to say, oh, can we shut down for Christmas? But I was able to present that, okay, this will save costs, it will help the staff rejuvenate. When we resume in January, we will be ready to work and all the benefits and all that. Sometimes too, it's timing. There have been situations where you can present suggestions, it's not accepted, but 6 months down the line, it's represented, it's also accepted. And we should also understand that in all organizations, whether big or small, there are office politics. So stakeholder engagement is very important wherever you are. If you are going to present an idea or a suggestion and you do not, sometimes you need to engage colleagues, or if you have a line head, let the line head see the benefit of that and allow them to present it so that the line head also share in the how do I in the benefits or in the glory of presenting that. If not, they could also shut down your idea, not because it's a bad idea, but just because someone is feeling, oh, he wants to show that he knows more than me, or look at this guy, he wants to go and show management that I don't know anything. So I think that those are just the small thoughts I can add to what Alhaji has said. We should also be mindful, particularly as HR person. And these days, that data is very important. Numbers is very important. Whatever idea we are going to suggest or put on the table, there must be cost benefit, there must be numbers to show what we are talking about, maybe by survey or something to show that XYZ is impact. For instance, assuming that the attrition rate in the organization is high and we have ideas on how we can reduce it, we must be able to show how this attrition rate has been increasing over time, the trends, the reasons, and then how our intervention we are proposing would also impact on that a particular problem. If we just go and talk, it may be thrown out because we are not talking about money. We are not showing them the cost benefit and how it will bring money to the organization. I will stop there. Thank you very much. That's just my thoughts in addition to Alhaji's own. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vijay. That's top notch.
Thank you so much. Sir, I don't know if you have any closing remarks. Those are all the questions and comments. We can call it a wrap. Do you have any closing remarks tonight, sir?
Okay. Thank you very much, Yemi, for again inviting me. Like we always say, we all, whether as HR professionals or business leaders, we all should learn to eat strategy for breakfast. Strategy, of course, is the bed upon which businesses are built. And unless as HR professionals, we are strategic partners, to business leaders, unless we are able to develop HR strategies around the strategic business objective of every organization or any organization where we work at all, the likelihood, of course, is that the leadership, in the business or in the organization will look at either the HR function or the HR lead, as someone who is just administering, or performing some administrative function. But where business strategies are developed, and as HR, we then develop strategic HR initiatives to support the achievement of those strategies. Like we always say, we become the table upon which, other members of the C-suite actually sit around to discuss those strategies, rather than, of course, crying about not having a table at all. or not having a seat at all at the table. So my charge to all of us as HR professionals is we must be strategic in our thinking, and we must always, of course, bring to the table very beautiful and, of course, very impactful strategic plans to help our businesses to grow. Growth, of course, for every business is what impacts the bottom line. Every business will be looking at this strategy that we have developed. How is it impacting on our P&L or on our bottom line? That will be my charge to us all as HR professionals. Thank you once again for having me. It's been a pleasure speaking to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Just would like to read a few comments, contributions from the floor here. I have from Oluwatoyin Adekute Akako. She says here, culture is really critical as much as we pay attention to the organizational strategy. Excellent. We also have the elected council member Adeyemi Ajayi says here, let's create a culture that will enable effective execution of strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have a few, what can I call it now, offline chats in the next few minutes, but let's formally end this session so that we can do some meet and greet. I can see some senior people on this call. Perhaps Alhaji Gobreu wants to say hello to people, or people also want to reach out to him.